As of November 2023, Google has been rolling out several controversial changes to the Google Play Developer Console requirements, creating quite a stir in the community. Previously, they introduced requirements for all new and existing developer accounts to verify their identity with official documentation. Their next change may prove to be even more difficult for many developers. You'll need a team of at least 20 verified testers using your app before you can ever publish it to production. Interestingly, this requirement is not aimed at companies, but at individual developers who are likely building apps and games on their own. In this video, I'll give you a roadmap to navigating this situation and how I would manage to do this if I were in your shoes. I'll break this video down into 4 parts. First, we'll look at what Google has stated in its requirements. Then we'll look into my recommendations regarding getting those 20 testers and some things you should specifically do and not do. Finally, we'll look at what the future may hold as Google solidifies its stance on the issue. Granted, the last point will be a bit of speculation, but it's based on their previous track record. Now, let's dive into what Google is actually requiring of us. So this is only going to apply to new individual developer accounts. So if you created a new developer account as an individual after November 13th, 2023, then this applies to you. So far, existing developer accounts are not going to be impacted, and companies are not going to be impacted. Keep in mind, these are also going to be on a per app basis. So this isn't just one and done. It's every new application that you're publishing to production. So what are they going to require? First, they're going to require that you have 20 testers that test your application for 14 continuous days. This is going to be on a per tester basis. So that means each one of the 20 testers that you have in there have to be opted into your testing cycle for 14 continuous calendar days. And the way that you're going to do this is with what are called test tracks. Google Play currently has 4 different test tracks. You will always have access to internal testing. This is typically used for developer builds that are very early on and it's not ready for production access at all. But then you can move it on to the closed testing. And this is where all of this private testing is going to go on. This is going to be the track where you're going to invite those 20 developers for 14 days to test your application before you can promote it to production. If you try to invite them into the internal testing, well, unfortunately, that's not going to count. You need it to be the closed testing circle. Anything beyond that, such as open testing and production, well, you're not going to have access to those things until you've completed what you need to for closed testing. Next thing you're going to need to do is gather some feedback from these people. So basically, if you invite 20 people to test your app for 14 days and none of them do anything, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. So you're going to need to provide some way for them to contact you, such as through email, an online form, or you can even use Google Play's testing feedback. If you do decide to use the testing feedback inside of Google Play, it's not going to actually show in production. So it's not like if they give you a poor rating there, that means it's going to reflect as 1 star whenever you publish your application. It's just for you to understand what people are thinking. Whenever you invite these people, Google basically expects that these people should know how to use your application, or they should be given instruction on how to use your application so they can test it properly. So basically, by the time they give you feedback, they should be testing pretty much all parts of your application, so it gives you an opportunity to act on their feedback. So whether that's fixing bugs or fixing things that they thought that were difficult to understand, that would be on you. After you've gone through the invitation, feedback, and bug fixing cycles, Google's going to allow you to apply for production access, and they're going to ask you a few questions. They want to know things like how easy was it for you to get access to these users? Did it meet their expectations? What was their experience like? Did it meet your expectations? Basically, what was the feedback like? What was your testing process like? And can you summarize this whole process? Then they're going to want to know about your app. How is your app unique? And what value does it provide that other apps just don't right now? What kind of people do you expect to use it? And even if you can answer this, how many people would you expect to use it? And that last one's a bit vague, so they're only expecting a ballpark figure. Finally, they're going to ask you about production readiness. They're going to ask you things like, what did you change based on user feedback that made it ready for production? And what made you decide that your app is now ready for production, that you're applying for this access? Once you submit the answers to those 3 questions, they'll take about 7 days or less to approve your request. But the journey doesn't end there. Once you have your app out in production, there are certain things you have to do to make sure that the quality of your app remains high. And this applies to everybody. This isn't new. So as of November 30, 2023, these are the metrics that Google looks at. Your app has to have a 1.09% or less of a crashing rate and a 0.47% or less application not responding rate. So basically, if your app crashes more than this amount of time, or if it freezes more than a certain amount of time, then your application will be considered low quality. Now, this applies across all devices that will download your app. One thing they are adding now is an 8% allowance per phone model. So in most cases, maybe you have an app that works great on almost every phone except one. So if there's a particular phone model that has an 8% crash rate or an 8% freeze rate, well, then it'll still be considered low quality. So you have some allowances here and there. The overall metrics for all devices which install your app are here, and their per phone model metrics are here. So if you don't meet any of these guidelines, then Google will either do one of 2 things. They may give a warning when a user visits your page to try to download your app that looks like this, basically saying it's probably not going to be stable. Or they may start reducing the amount of times that your app shows up in search results because it's just not deemed stable enough. Okay, so now that we know that Google's looking for, the big outstanding thing is 20 testers for 2 weeks. Great. How do we get there? We could start off with the obvious things like family, friends, coworkers, and things like that, but honestly, this could still be hard. Most people in my family, for instance, are iOS users, so I can't have them test Android apps. But wait, don't start there. If you're starting to build an app with the question, how do I get 20 testers to use my application? Well, that's backwards. Instead, you need to start at the ideation phase. When you have an idea for an app, research it first. Don't start writing code right away and assume everything's going to be okay. If you're going to spend weeks and months, maybe even years of your life building something, make sure people actually want to use it. If it's only useful to you, well then maybe there's no need to publish it on Google Play. So at this ideation phase, here's a couple questions that you can ask. When you want to build an application, are there other apps out there that already do this really well? If there are, then you're probably not likely to stand out. So for instance, if I wanted to create a world-class language learning application, I'm going to be going up against names like Duolingo or Babbel or things like that, and they already have a very well-established fan base across the entire world, so I'm probably not going to succeed there. In other cases, maybe there are some apps out there that do what you're looking for, but there's no good apps out there. So what about your application is going to improve where the other apps seem to have failed? Will it be worth your time, and do you think you can get enough people interested in your specific improvement? The other case is, no, there's no apps out there at all. Well, maybe you're asking something that's way too obscure and nobody particularly cares. Or maybe you discovered a gold mine. But honestly, I wouldn't jump to the gold mine conclusion right away. Really think about this first. The other question to ask is this something that people actually want? Do you hear hobbyists or professionals saying, man, I really wish there was an app that did X? Because you certainly don't want to waste your time on something that's too obscure. Plus, there's lots of commercial and open source projects out there that have great APIs, and nobody's got around to building an app yet. So, for instance, if you have a large corporation such as, say, Twilio, with no official app but great robust APIs, then maybe you could just scratch an itch with their APIs that nobody's bothered building software for yet. So as you're starting to build your application, those are the two questions that you should have front of mind. Now, let's switch to the other side of this and think about this from Google's perspective. Google has a store where they sell apps, and they want to make sure that everything that lands on there is worth their time, because after all, they're paying reviewers to stay on top of all the requirements for all of the apps. Now, let's take a look at an example of a store that didn't do this so well, and this is the end result. For this example, we're going to be looking at the Microsoft Store, and as much as I respect Microsoft, I think there's some room for improvement here. I'm on the application homepage, and you can see they have a number of heavy-hitting apps here. So if I scroll down to, say, Essential Apps, they have things like TikTok and Adobe Acrobat and Photoshop and things that we're all used to. Scrolling down a bit more, you can see there's other ones, Zoom, Canva. We know what those are. But let me go for a search here. I'm going to search for things like streaming, and let's just see what comes up for streaming. So right away, I'm going to go ahead and filter to apps. You can see there's some things that most of us probably know what they are. We have OBS Studios, Disney+, Hulu, Netflix, different things like that. So far, so good. But once I start scrolling down and I go past maybe the first, say, 3 rows, maybe 4 at most, then we start getting into some really obscure applications. If I were to take a look at this example right here, we have Stream IPTV Player. Well, I've never heard of it before, and odds are you probably haven't either. And if you take a look at the reviews, it's 2.9 star. Let me just keep going and let's see how many of the things after this point we really know. Okay, Plex showed up, fairly common, but beyond that, like, honestly, what's this? It has stretch pictures for the results. It's 2.6 star, has 68 ratings. Honestly, it just looks like somebody slammed this together and threw it up on the store, and it really reflects that. So this isn't something that's high-quality applications that's worth people's time and is gaining a lot of traction. So more than likely, if Microsoft had a vetting process where you have to have a certain threshold before reaching production, maybe their store would look a lot cleaner. Granted, Microsoft is playing a bit of catch-up in terms of number of apps, so there wouldn't be as many things on there, but the things that are on there would probably be worth your time. So considering both sides of this, the questions that you should be asking and the things that Google's looking for, if you're comfortable moving forward because you have a really great idea, here's honestly what I would do. I would start talking about it today. Literally. Go online, create a social media account, and start doing it. In my opinion, by far the best platform for doing this is X, or Twitter. Regardless of your opinions on the platform, it's extremely developer-friendly. And in my opinion, it's the biggest and best platform I've ever seen for developers to start talking about their application a lot. It's called Building in Public, and it literally has its own hashtag, hashtag Build in Public. There's actually a bot that if you make a post and you use hashtag Build in Public, it will retweet this out to anybody who's following this hashtag. Some of the most successful indie developers I've ever met did this, literally daily, several times a day. Let me show you how it works. Grab your laptop, start writing some code, get your phone, take a picture, Just got collision detection working. OMG. Hashtag build in public. Post. It's that easy. Now, I can hear exactly what you're saying. You're like, Oliver, it takes a lot of work to build an application and get it in production. Why would I waste my time posting about it on X when I could spend that time coding instead? Well, you're thinking about it backwards, and here's why. When you post on X or any social media site, it gets people interested in your app right away. Basically, it allows people to first know about your application, and then you can gauge your audience's reaction. Plus, it allows you to spread the word early and spread it often so you get more people with more eyes on what you're doing. And it should give you a fan base early so that you don't need to start from zero whenever you're ready to start testing your application. So if you're posting daily updates about the progress of your app, that's great. But if you don't have a follower base and you're blasting this out into the void, that's not so great. So what do you do in that case? First, go find other like-minded developers that are also building their applications in public and start to network with them. Or you can find people who are in your target audience and you think might be interested in what you're building and follow them. Literally, go get big name people. Don't be intimidated. If they're a big name on social media, they're probably engaging there at least daily. So go and engage with their posts. Don't just like their post, don't just give it a heart, but actually engage somewhat and offer value. Comment on their posts and really start to offer value. Once they start seeing your comments after a while and you start seeing theirs, at some point you may end up following each other and networking. I get it. It can be really hard to break out of your comfort zone, but you need to if you want your application to succeed. You will not exist without social media and some form of marketing. So vetting your app's idea and letting people know about it on social media are going to be really important to getting your application out there. But here's some things I recommend you totally don't do at all. When news of this new requirement first started dropping, people in the developer community started panicking and they're like, well, what am I going to do to get 20 testers? Maybe I can hire some people on Fiverr or Upwork and they can join my community, or maybe I'll join another person's community. We can all test each other's apps out. Well, that might work for a time, but honestly, I'm going to urge extreme caution if you're going to go down that route. And the reason why is we need to understand the spirit of why Google is requiring this. The number of 20 testers, it's really not all that arbitrary. Basically, they're expecting the number of people that you pick to all be interested in your application and to represent an accurate segment of the population that will likely use your application in production someday. Think about it. Whenever you apply for production access, they're going to ask you, how hard was it to recruit these people? And if you have a great idea and you've been telling people about it in public, it really shouldn't be that hard. So if you start to farm out all this work to different contractors on Fiverr or some company that promises to get you to this magical 20 people, Google may start to notice that the people that are testing your apps may have tested, say, 50 or 100 apps that week, and that may start to raise red flags. If you go this route, Google may start to put these pieces together and decide that you're trying to sidestep their requirement. At best, they may decide, well, we're not going to grant you production access for this app. At worst, they may shut your account down. And if you've ever read any stories about Google shutting your Play account down, they're not at all shy about it, and the internet is full of these stories. There are plenty of stories online where people who have had good developer standing accounts with Google Play for years suddenly just get shut down over some arbitrary rule. And often there's very little recourse, and it's usually permanent. Even if you open up another Google Play account to try to do it all over again, they generally shut you down because they see you as a bad actor. Some people have even gone so far as to surmise that whole organizations have been shut down. Basically, they have someone who was a bad actor once join the organization account, Google recognizes the connection, and they shut the entire organization down over that one account. Basically, you don't want to work against Google. You don't want to raise any red flags. You want to work with them as much as possible. The other thing people have suggested is trying to join a developer community where everybody there is trying to get their apps into production so everybody helps each other out by becoming a tester. That could work, but it could also carry some similar risks to what we just discussed up above. Plus, nobody really wants to do this for free. To be perfectly honest, if you want to get your app into production, how many other apps are you willing to test for 2 weeks at a time just to get your app into production? More than likely, these communities, unless there's some sort of monetary reimbursement, it's probably just going to fizzle out because nobody wants to do all that extra work. The last thing I'll say is do not, under any circumstance, open up 20 Google accounts so that you can test this all yourself. I guarantee you this is a beautiful, expedited, one-way ticket to the banhammer. An outstanding question you might have is this ever going to affect me at some point? Maybe you don't have a new individual developer account that's subject to these requirements. So let's look a little bit into the future. I'll preface this by saying everything in this section here is purely based on speculation, but it is based on Google's history. So how does Google typically do things? Typically, whenever they have a new policy they want to roll out, they'll typically apply it only to new apps and new accounts for a certain period of time. So for instance, if they want to raise the target API level, for instance, well, that's only going to be subject to new apps. And then several months later, existing apps also have to reach that target API level. The same thing applies to new policies. So for instance, whenever they required account verification, that started for new accounts back in July of 2023, and then finally it caught up with all existing accounts in November 2023. More than likely, I would suspect that they're going to do the same thing here. Maybe they'll see how it goes with new developer accounts, maybe work out a few bugs, and then push it out to existing profiles. Maybe just individuals, maybe also organizational accounts. I don't really know. More than likely, I would guess that they're not going to do it for existing apps, but at most it might require a certain install base. Now again, this is still all speculation, but if Google Play really is aiming for high-quality, well-used applications, they may end up removing small or unused applications, or at least issuing a warning that probably should have some more activity in order to continue being on the Play Store. Regardless of what happens in the future, my recommendations are the same. Research your application to make sure that people would actually want to use it. And then as you're building your application, build a community that's excited about what you're building. Then launch it in public. You can literally start now. Build your application and your community at the same time so that if the policy changes, all you need to do is call on your community and they'll come to your rescue. So that's it. We started off by looking at Google Play's requirements. You'll need 20 testers for 14 calendar days and the closed testing track. After that, then you can apply for production access. Then we moved on to my suggestions for your success. Basically, play by the rules, build in public, and build a community that's excited about what you're building. We also touched on some things not to do. Specifically, don't ever try to abuse the system and play by the spirit of what Google's looking to get done. Finally, we looked into the future and how this may potentially impact all new applications. Basically, the rules for that game are the exact same. It's easy to make Google out to be the villain here, saying that they don't like individual developers or small companies, but I'm not convinced that's true. Instead, Google's new developer policy might not be addressing a Google problem, but a developer problem where we haven't been bringing our A game. Effectively, if we start from the beginning by building our apps with our best effort in mind, we should have no problem satisfying this new requirement. After all, getting 20 people to download our app is hardly a room full of people. Once you get this far, then you can move on to more interesting things, like building apps with AI, like I did here. If you want to go back to the real developer stuff, click here. Otherwise, I'll see you next time on TLDR Android. Thanks, and happy coding.